Indeed, I'm here to talk about smaller teams, better orgs, and I started by calling that less is more. Everything will make sense, I promise. First thing though, I want to prompt your brains with a bit of a challenge. Can you guess what is that? Bit of a hint is measured in nanoteslas, which is not tiny electric cars, it's something else. This is the magnetic field of the Earth, right? So random, like this guy talking about the magnetic field of the Earth. There's the point to it. It was only until like maybe 10 years ago that humankind was able to measure the magnetic field of the Earth as a vector. It was always like, okay, that's so many, the magnitude and so on. We always did with compasses, but we never were able to see actually how the magnetic field of the Earth was, right? So there was a satellite mission called SWARM that actually mapped the magnetic field of the Earth, right? And to do that, ESA needed to fly these three birds, right? And there's a whole of orbit dynamics going on, and there's instruments measuring vectors and so on and so forth. It was complex, but it worked, right? And then we finally solved mysteries like the Bermuda Triangle and all these anomalies on the magnetic field of the Earth, why this happened. What's the point of this? Well, I happened to work on that mission. And there was a moment in the mission where we needed to code algorithms and stuff, and we just didn't have the bandwidth. Critical path, everyone was in panic. We're not going to get it done, what's going to happen? So we had to face a lot of naysaying, a lot of, oh, can't be done, everyone was panicking. You need at least 10 people, and you are only 4, right? There's no way you can do it. Oh my God, there's going to be delays, we need to inform whatever high boss is there, right? So everything was basically not good. And I was part of a team of 4 people, a software engineer. And guess what? We got it done with 4 people. That was very, very counterintuitive, right? And we also didn't crunch. We were not staying long hours. We just were very, very, very efficient. And at that point just triggered, after all these years, I'm still thinking like, why did that happen, right? We were going all against the current, right? And it's beeping, right? Yeah. And we were going against the current, and actually we got it done, right? So a bit of myself to enter the thing. This is me, born and raised in Mallorca, so I have a bit of German thing there. Electrotechnical engineering, I worked at private aerospace companies and also at ESA, and then some years ago I joined Adyen, started the data team there. We started with maybe 5 people when I joined, now it's around 200, and running that org. And by the way, do you know what Adyen is? Hands up if you know it. Yeah, we're in the Netherlands. When you go around the world, they say, what is Adyen? And you're like, oh no, I need to explain it. Good, then I thought I won't give the talk about it. So I call that less is more. And less is more is actually a motto that you might have heard here and there, which I didn't invent, of course. And it comes from this minimalist architecture current, right? This beautiful building, I find it very beautiful, by the way. I have a bit of OCD. I like these straight lines, gives me joy. Doesn't work well when you have 2 little kids. Chaos around the house, but yeah. And that was an architect called Mies van der Rohe. And he was the one who invented the whole less is more minimalist thing, right? So smaller things or like simplistic things, actually they get most of it, right? So less is more, and for engineering teams, that basically means maybe smaller teams are actually better. But again, is that it? I had evidence at least it can happen once. But then we were in this growth mindset. Everyone was hiring, you know, just get your teams going and scale up and all that. So I reflected a lot on why did that happen? I want to replicate that model, right? And I thought, well, maybe it's the team size. Maybe it's the people that are on it. Maybe it's the manager that was really good. Maybe it's the culture of the company. Maybe it's the challenge that was really, really enticing. Maybe it was they were very well paid. I can tell you wasn't the point I didn't explain 15 years ago. Maybe it was stress. You were at this tipping point where stress was good. Or maybe it was the weather. I don't know. Everything was random, or everything could contribute to it. I'm not sure, but I tried to get my head around it, right? And I'm not the only one thinking about it, right? You have heard about the famous pizza rule. You should be able to feed your team with 2 pizzas. I keep thinking, like, what does it mean for Europe and the US? But yeah, probably the pizzas are bigger there as well. So it could be fine, right? And apart from the size of the team, at the end of the day, what we want is to get things done, right? We want to be efficient and get things done. And the team is just another parameter that you play with to get it done, right? So it's about measuring productivity and being open and honest about it, right? Are we actually getting stuff done or are we not? And what do we need to change here or there, right? So in order to measure productivity, I was wrapping my head around it, and I was thinking, okay, what are the contributors of all of this, right? And I'm talking here more in the managerial aspect, of course. You need skill as an individual contributor. So if you don't have software engineers that can write code, I can guarantee nothing will get done, right? So let's take that for granted for a second. So how can you design organizations that are actually efficient, right? And I boiled it down to 4 things. Motivation, trust, communication, and entanglement. And I'll go through them one by one, right? So motivation. What it means is that it needs to come from inside, from the people inside. They want to have to work. They want to wake up in the morning and they want to go to work and get stuff done. And they're energized about it, right? And it starts with the basics, right? Being happy, feeling psychologically safe, like being a team where you're not fearing anyone. There's no elbowing. There's no politics, crazy stuff going on. There's, of course, you getting paid all right. If you think that they are ripping you off, then not. You don't want to be in the trust zone or in the happiness zone. Work-life balance. One thing I love here in the Netherlands is that that's very, very respected. And I love that, by the way. Engineers need a challenge, right? They need to say, hey, I'm going to solve this problem. So it needs to be an exciting project, right? So probably if they have done that already 3 times, they're not going to be very excited. So you also need to balance this sort of thing. It needs to be a time box, right? That contributes to the challenge. If you write beating Parkinson's law, which basically says that a task will take you as much time as you allocate to it, right? So it's like, hey, time box this. And then the hold my beer attitude, right? A bit of can be done. And they're like, yeah, worry, I'll try. Sharing wins, it's important as well. You want to be in the winning team. You want to be there and say like, hey, everyone's getting stuff done. I also want to get stuff done. And then seeing that there's stuff happening around you, right? That you're not like, everything is gray and sad. No, everyone energizes everyone. And of course, there's a purpose and there's a vision. We are going somewhere. We're just not like working very hard to do something no one understands, right? Then there is trust. And trust is probably the word I repeat the most with my teams. It boils down to trust, right? If you have good people and you trust them, things will happen. If you don't trust them, then you will start micromanaging and doing crazy stuff you shouldn't, right? So if you're the manager, you need to convey trust by having strategic thinking, for example. Being respected as the main knowledge, that's a hard one, right? There's a lot of controversy around, hey, does the manager need to be an expert or does need to know, needs to be an engineer himself or needs to be even the best engineer? I believe that at least the manager and engineer needs to understand what they're talking about, right? You don't necessarily need to be the best engineer. That optimizes for a different culture. And of course, the attitude, right? This person that can embrace trust. Then you design your teams. So how do you design your teams? The team taxonomy. Are you making the hard calls when you should, when things are not working? Are you promoting the right people? Are you okay working with product managers? It could be a bit of a friction moment there also. Then going back to autonomy, right? Are you giving them the autonomy to get stuff done, or are you actually micromanaging them, right? So if there's no trust, you probably will go into micromanaging. So you shouldn't do that. Maybe you should do other things. And then the mindset around the team members themselves, right? We win, you win, I win attitude, not like I'm going to win first. And helping and talking straight, very important, right? If you hide the facts, if you sugarcoat, then everyone is pretending and no one is trusting anyone. Another one is communication, right? So we need to communicate. We need to exchange ideas. We need to align. But what you don't want is to end up in a meeting culture, right? Like meetings and meetings and meetings, right? So communication happens at 4 different areas, right? Top down, so you communicate to your reports. You have to do that with clarity, with respect, and also limited, right? You don't want to be all the time telling them stuff. It needs to happen also bottoms up, right? People need to be able to tell you things. So just the possibility of that should be there, right? And they should be at freedom because there's a trust. So they can tell you, hey, this doesn't work, fix it, right? It also helps on ideation, discovery, and co-creation of different ideas that you might not have thought about, right? Inside the team, there will be a lot of interactions as well, right? So it needs to be effective, limited, and you need to make sure that the team actually aligns, right? and also across teams, because the problem with all these autonomous teams is silos, right? So classical example, 2 teams in different parts of the org working on the same problem, solving it same by different, right? That's waste. So you should make sure that done. Word of caution there, meeting culture, right? Beware of the M&Ms. So the Monday morning meeting, everyone opening their laptop, and everyone like, I don't care, I just need to sit here because my manager wants to, right? That's stupid, sorry for cursing, but don't do that, right? So think of it as arrows. You have a limited, they're very effective, but don't shoot in the sky just because you can, right? And then there's another factor I call entanglement, which is probably what happened back in Swan, right? Which is like, there was a moment where everyone was so energized that kind of resonated, right? It's like, it was bigger than the sum. It's more, like, so it was something I was thinking, like, I'm theorizing maybe if everyone is so energized and everyone is good, you actually can get beyond the productivity on paper that you should get out of, say, n headcount, right? But all theories, and I was thinking, can I prove this? And I did something I probably shouldn't have, which is, if now you can code anything, can I code a mathematical model for it, just for the fun of it? So I was in a flight a couple of weeks ago, long flight in the US, and I said, I'm going to spin off a notebook, and I'm going to try to make proof that actually smaller orgs are better. So I did it, which, in the hindsight, I should say that's probably not the best use of my time, but I can guarantee you it was fun. Even more in a plane where you don't have internet connection, so you cannot visit documentation and Stack Overflow. Guilty, that's all. So in a way, I ended up having like, okay, I want to have mathematical proof of it, so I ended up working with graphs and network X and meeting my nemesis, which is recursivity, and saying, hey, can we code a mathematical model of an organization and prove that a smaller team can run better than a big team, right? So that's what I did. You have some objects, whatever, I'm not going to go into it. But the idea is that you have 2 types of people in an org, right? You have the managers, and then you can have layers of management, and then you have the individual contributors, which are the ones actually doing the work, right? And the productivity is measured by the work actually done by the individual contributors, right? So the ones shipping the code. The managers, the only thing they do, only and essential, is to conduct those principles, motivation and trust, right? And make sure that things actually happen. So in this model, I say, well, I theorize the bigger the team, the harder it gets. So conveying motivation and trust to 35 people is way harder than doing that for 5 people, right? So I just invented that. Completely an assumption just for the sake of it, right? And then I said, well, and then you might have some random variables saying like how good of you are a manager, because not everyone is a good manager. Some of them are good managers, some others are bad managers. So give a bit of bandwidth there, right? You could be this or that, right? And then you have the individual contributors, and then they receive the motivation and the trust from their managers, right? Managers basically energize them. And then there's the skill, right? Which I modeled with a random variable here about how good every person is, right? Super random. And when the layers, they stack up, you basically multiply this motivation and trust, right? So if your top manager is 80% energetic, and then your other manager is 80% energetic, you receive 64% of energy, for example, right? Just to model. And then I say, well, then you have this motivation and trust, just average them, multiply by the skill and the boost factor. So if everyone is really good, then you get a boost of 30%. Again, it was just my idea. Say, let's see how it works. And then I simulated random runs of organizations to see what could happen, right? And I ended up with a beautiful plot, whatever that means, right? Said, well, that's probably a lot of people. 8,000 people probably is too much. So I'm going to constrain that to 2,000, which is a lot of people. And here, what I'm saying here, right, is the average size of every layer, right? How many people are there on every layer? And 2, 3, 4 layers. And then you see something interesting. Well, first is that the productivity degrades with team size. That's basically a given the assumptions that we made. But you have 2 vectors, right? So you have two things here. I have one area or one, let's say, vertical or asymptotic line where productivity goes very fast down, and the other one which still holds some productivity for a while and scale better the teams. What was the key there is the number of layers. So if you have 2 layers, meaning you need to have big teams, right? And this is something that in Agent happened, right? We were saying like, we run a flat org. We don't want a lot of managers, just a flat org. So what happens is you scale the teams, and then you end up having teams of 20, right? Because flat org. However, given this model, actually it's better to add a new layer and have a team of 5 people. And that's just coming from the assumptions, also probably from the observations in my career. But yeah, that's something that for me was a bit like, that probably we should think about that. Now it gets harder. Now you need to find the good managers because that multiplies down. So if you have a bad apple there, you basically make 5 or 6 people ineffective, which is very expensive. So yeah, I left out communication because everything was getting a bit too complex, and I thought, what's the point? But think about meetings, right? So if you think about an org, say, of a number of people, then it's a combinatorial, like they start talking to each other, right? And there's a lot of combinations possible. So if you have a team of 4 people, right, you have 6 combinations of 2 people talking, you have 4 combinations of 3 people talking, and you have 1 combination of 4 of them. That's only with 4 people, right? So if you start adding time and say, okay, 40 hours a week, every combination 1 hour per person, then you quickly see that up to 8 people, your 80% of their time is in meetings. It's a very harsh model, but it's basically facing you with the fact that, all this is combinatorial, it's exponential, right? So careful there. And to pin it all down, I checked what I don't know, price is low. Price is low says half of the work, 50% of the work will get done by the square root of people. So if you have a team of 9 people, 3 people will do half of the work, and the other 6 people will do the other half, right? That's a bit like a kind of a rule of thumb, right? And I said, well, I'm going to measure productivity. So if I have a star team of square root of n, imagine I have another star team of square root of n, and the rest is waste. And then you see the productivity just bashing down. So if you really want to be, say, with 10 people, you probably are 65% productive, or where you should be, according to that law, right? So what is the point in all this? I went through all this crazy stuff on models and graphs and whatever, just to prove the point to myself that what is better, a new layer or a bigger team? And more important, I didn't simulate it because it was there's no need. But if you have a very bad manager at the top, everyone is de-energized, right? So also choose well your management. So back to the top, less is more, smaller teams, right? But it's not only about that, right? Size is just a parameter. You play around to design those teams that get stuff done, right? There's other things that you need to do as well, right? So provide them with autonomy, right? We touched upon that before. Give them the freedom, give them the purpose, but also give them the bandwidth for themselves to get it done. Don't need to tell them, right? So you, as a manager, you convey the motivation and the trust and the direction, part of it, but they get it done and they decide, right? So for example, in Agile, we don't tell them, you should do Scrum. No, just whatever you need, right? We are also very hygienic with the tooling choices, as Picnic is, but there is a middle ground, right? And then maybe more importantly is prioritize. And that's something that is very unspoken, let's say these days. We were in a growth economy where everyone's like, grow your team, get more stuff done. And people thought linearly, right? They thought more headcount, more stuff done. The point of this is like, no, actually there's a degradation of productivity if you're not smart about it. There's a price to pay. So in that sense, what I always ask my people is, hey, stack rank what you need to do, right? Make a list, and probably whatever falls fourth and down, drop it. Just don't do it. Probably it's not that important. If you get the 3 things done at the top, beautiful year, right? What happens probably in the past and especially in other places was try to do as much as you can without thinking about this price to pay, which is this productivity and efficiency slowdown, right? And therefore begs the question, if you need to spin off a new team, do you actually need to, right? Or is something that you can, is it a priority or not, right? So think about it, because headcount is not only expensive, it's not going to be only your CFO telling you, you have a big team, what are getting done, but it's also going to be an effect on the productivity and the energy in general, right? That's it. That's my presentation. Thank you very much.